Hey guys, so in this video I'm going to go over what I believe are the most optimal settings in Fortnite, as well as what I've been using just because I've seen a lot of people ask them in the comments. I'm going to compare and show the differences between each setting on high versus low, or having a certain setting on versus off, and then I'll explain exactly what each setting does and how it will probably affect your gameplay. These settings should hopefully make your game look nicer and also give you a nice little FPS boost to make your game run smoother. I'm on PC, so these settings will mainly be tailored to PC players, but I will go over any console settings that I see fit, as I did play Fortnite on controller for more than half a year. So let's jump right into it, starting with your video settings. Your window mode should definitely be set to full screen. If you don't know this already, there will be slight input lag if you play on windowed or windowed full screen. There's definitely going to be a lot of people who are ready to comment saying that they play on stretched and it only allows them to use windowed full screen or windowed. So I'll leave a link in the description to a good video by I'm Speedy Gonzalez that shows you how to play stretched in full screen, so go check that out if you're having trouble playing stretched in full screen mode. You can also try changing the resolution of your monitor to the same res you're playing in Fortnite. Display resolution I have on 1920 by 1080, and most of you probably should too. The other two options are 1600 by 900 and 1280 by 720, which are the same aspect ratios, so they won't let you play stretch. They're just two other 16 by 9 resolutions with much less pixels. So if you're not getting as much FPS, I'd recommend playing on 1600 by 900 first, and then if it's still pretty bad, go down to 1280 by 720. You can see they're blurrier and not as clear because they don't have the same number of pixels, but again, it's the same aspect ratio, so there's no benefit of getting the extra vertical FOV like you would when you play stretch. Then frame rate limit. If you guys haven't seen my other video on capping your FPS versus leaving it uncapped, then go check that out. To sum the video up, Fortnite interacts really weirdly with your FPS and your frame rate limit, also known as your FPS cap. My suggestion is to cap it at the next highest value above your monitor's refresh rate. So for a 60Hz monitor, cap it at 120, for a 144, cap it at 160, 165, or 200, and for a 240Hz monitor, don't leave it uncapped, just cap it at 240. Quality is just default. 3D resolution is my current res, which is 1680 by 1080. This is a very slightly stretched resolution. Its aspect ratio is 16 by 10, but I think it looks nicer than native, and it isn't really hard to look at compared to some of the more stretched resolutions. I feel like I say this in every other video, but stretch does give you an advantage. In my recent video, I compared every stretch resolution that's been pretty popular recently, and I showed the differences in vertical FOV you get, so you're kind of just being ignorant if you don't think that stretch offers any advantages. You also will get better FPS because of less pixels from the lower resolution and aspect ratio, so just keep that in mind if you're trying to become a very competitive player. Pretty much every pro uses stretch resolutions except maybe Tfue and a couple of others who mainly do it for content. So if you want my personal recommendation, I think you should definitely be playing on stretched. Check out my stretch res videos if you're not informed, but I'm telling you that once you switch to stretched, you won't go back to native. Now we can get into actual graphic settings, first with view distance. I have mine on Epic, and if your computer can handle it, then there's no reason not to. You can see the difference when looking at Viking Hill and the castle at Polar Peak on near view distance. They don't appear at all, but on Epic view distance, both appear. Just realize view distance will not affect the render distance of a player or player's builds, so it's only things like weapons, buildings, and other things like that. I don't like having it on near, mainly because once you get into range of things, they start popping up on your screen and that can get pretty annoying. I would suggest having it on near medium if you need the extra FPS, so toy around with it to find the highest you can go that will still give you a solid amount of FPS. Next up are shadows, which you definitely want off. When I turn on shadows, you can see all of Tilted is pretty much darker in the daytime. There's shadows from the buildings, the street lights, the cars, and even a shadow from the character model that you're using. When you go into buildings, it's extremely dark and hard to see. With shadows off, on the other hand, it's much easier to see, everything is brighter, and you wouldn't have a problem seeing people like you would with shadows on. Unfortunately, our console brothers are forced to have shadows, so leave an F in the comment section for them. Otherwise, you should absolutely turn your shadows off. After that is anti-aliasing. If you don't know what anti-aliasing is, it smooths edges on 3D objects. Higher anti-aliasing will make the edges for your characters and surroundings look smoother, but your FPS will suffer. Unless you have your texture settings on high, this will be kind of difficult to observe, but if you pay attention to the tip of the building, without anti-aliasing, you can see there are jagged edges. With anti-aliasing on Epic, the jagged edges are gone and the top of the building is much smoother. The downside is that anti-aliasing will make your game look a lot blurrier. It feels like I'm looking at the game without my glasses on when I have anti-aliasing on Epic. I recommend having it on off or medium because you'll get a lot more FPS when it's lower, but some people prefer a little bit of anti-aliasing, so putting it on medium is a decent option as well. Textures are an interesting setting. If we go back to our example from view distance, when textures are on low, the castle on Polar Peak looks like a blob, but when we put textures on Epic, we can make out most of the outlines and get a lot more detail from the castle. This is the only other setting other than anti-aliasing I would have on something other than low or off. It doesn't lower your FPS by that much, so you can have it on something like high or medium. Personally, I have mine on low. Effects I have on low, as having it any higher actually loses you a lot of FPS. It also doesn't provide any advantage, it just makes certain objects and interactions look more detailed and cooler, like a chest or opening the chest, but it makes my game feel really bad, so I suggest having it on low. Your chest won't look as beautiful anymore, but I guess that's the price you have to pay to make your game run smoothly. Last in the graphics setting is post-processing. As the name implies, it just renders and processes the images after the game is already loaded up. This will definitely worsen your performance if you have it on high or epic, so pretty much everyone, including me, has it on low. I've talked about VSync before, but it's basically the feature that caps your FPS at your monitor's refresh rate to try and smooth out your game and prevent screen tearing. The thing is, if you have it enabled through the game, it will destroy your FPS and make your game feel like crap, so I do not recommend having it on. If you have VSync through your monitor or G-Sync, you can play around with those settings if they're through your monitor. Otherwise, do not turn on VSync in-game, it's basically the devil. Motion blur is also something you don't want on. It's kind of hard to see if you get really good FPS, but it definitely eats away at your FPS, and if you have ever played on a PlayStation 4 Pro, I think it is, that has motion blur enabled by default, so you can see just how ugly it is. Anonymous mode I have off because I don't stream yet. This is probably a good time to plug my Twitch, so go follow it because I will start streaming soon, most likely on Twitch. It's the same as my YouTube name, it's Jarian, and I'll leave a link in the description. Hide other players' names off, and 0 matchmaking delay. HUD scale is all personal preference, mine is on the default 1.0, but I have seen a lot of people who put it lower for some reason. Maybe they don't like it taking up their screen, but I think you'd want it bigger if anything, so you can see how many mats and ammo you have quicker. Show spectator count on so we can see how many bots are spectating us in scrims. Peripheral lighting off. I've never tried it, but I heard if you do connect your Razer or Logitech keyboard or mouse, it will light up purple if you're in the storm, and it will flash if you get shot at, and other cool interactions like that, so give it a try and let me know if you use it. Toggle sprint off. You don't want your sprint to be toggleable pretty much ever. Sprint by default I have on, and honestly this might sound a bit harsh, but you're a beta if you have this off. There are no downsides at all. You will never need to walk, and for everyone who says you lose control of your character, that's just not true at all. You gain left shift as a keybind, which is amazing for a build bind or editing or crouching, which is what I use left shift for. My tip for getting used to left shift and sprint by default on is to completely unbind left shift and not rebind it to whatever you plan to yet. Then after a week or so of getting used to sprint by default on, you can bind it to whatever you please. This way, if you bind it to say your edit key, you won't screw up your gameplay when you initially switch by misclicking left shift, which will happen a lot. Sprint cancels reloading off, tap to search off, toggle targeting off, reset building choice off, aim assist. I'm on PC, but on console you want that on. If you've had that off on console, I honestly don't even know what to say to you. Edit mode aim assist I would have turned off because when I played console, having aim assist for my edits was super annoying, so I think most good controller players have that off. Turbo building on. This isn't season 1 or 2. Turbo building is extremely important. Turbo delete in creative mode on. Auto material change you definitely want on. That's a setting that makes it so if you run out of wood, it will change to brick or metal. So that's just a nice little quality of life option that you want on. I'm not on controller, so I'm not sure about controller auto run. Auto open doors is no. Reason being, it will probably be helpful in some situations, like if you accidentally edit a door while rotating late in scrims. But most of the time it's pretty useless or will backfire against you if you're trying to peek someone through a door and accidentally open it. Auto pickup weapons used to be really OP. You could just land on top of people and on weapon spawns, and you didn't have to press your interact key to pick up weapons. I used to never lose 50 vs 50s off spawn because of it, but now they nerfed it so you can't do that anymore. Now it's pretty much all preference. I'm used to picking up random weapons when I run over them, so it's not a huge deal whether it's on or off. Lastly is auto sort consumables to the right, which is really nice to have on, so you don't need to go into your inventory and sort any shields or health consumables. The rest are controller or replay mode settings, which don't really apply to me or affect my gameplay, so I'm just gonna show you guys them but not go over them. The last thing I'll cover are brightness and colorblind settings. I have my brightness on the default value. I've never played around with it because I've really never had a hard time seeing things, and this won't help you at nighttime in game when things are harder to see, so mine's just by default. Colorblind settings I have off, but I'll go through them just to give you a quick glance at what each does. Deuteranope, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, is red-green color blindness, so the greens and blues are extremely dark and the purple is pretty much pink. When you edit, the blue squares are much darker and the whole map looks more faded because of how dark the green is. Protanope is also red-green color blindness, but it doesn't seem to be as drastic as the colors aren't really that different from regular non-colorblind settings. The green and blue is definitely a little bit darker and the pink and gold is a little more vibrant, but not by a lot. Last is Tritanope, which is for blue-yellow color blindness. This is what Mongrel uses and what I would probably use if I use any colorblind setting. The green is darker and the purple is a little more pink again, but the biggest difference is how bright the blue is. This is probably the nicest looking color scheme to me, but I'm used to the default colors, so I have it off. Overall, that should pretty much cover everything you need to know about in-game video settings and gameplay settings, as well as what I use. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications. This video shoutouts go to Euros Zamba, Random Stuff Aiden, Et Noir, Noah Villager, and Scyther, who all use my code in the item shop. Remember that if you use my code, make sure to send me a pic on Twitter or Instagram. Otherwise, that's it for me, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.